Hello class. This tutorial will cover literature circles, the model, and what you're expected to be doing to fulfill the requirement of the assignment. So first what I'm going to do is talk to you about literature circles, and then we'll go on to find out what exactly you need to do. So here we go. Literature circles and technology. Explore the possibilities, and there are many. There are different names that people call the model. So here you could see we've got literature clubs and book clubs and literature circles. And the reading experts have different titles too. I particularly find Harvey Daniels' books to be very, very interesting, and he calls them literature circles. Now, I've come up with my own definition, and that's students meet regularly in small groups to deepen their understanding of literature. And this regular meeting could take place face-to-face or online, the way we're going to be doing it in our class. So what are some of the features of literature circles? Well, obviously you need students, which you qualify for that. Sometimes students choose books, but that is not always practical, especially in this class where I've selected the book. The groups are small when you're doing them in school. They could be heterogeneous or homogeneous based on the student's needs. They meet regularly. The teacher is the facilitator, although in this case we're going to have a discussion director who will be facilitating discussion. And the evaluation is by self-assessment, and there could be extension activities, and everybody has a good time. And so what are the benefits to the model? So you could see in front of you there are many benefits, and I've listed them here. And most importantly, in case your administration wants to know the value of it, you could let them know that it's endorsed by the NCTE and IRA. Now, we're going to be using roll sheets, and so roll sheets, think of them as training wheels. They're just ways to help students think about how they could participate in a group. And once they're comfortable with the different roles and speaking in groups, you could always switch just to response logs, which are basically journals, and that's something that you would probably be doing if you were using this with high school students. So over here is an overview of some of the roles, and this came from Daniels. So you could see there's word wizard and discussion director, which we'll be having in our class. A summarizer, researcher, illustrator, passage master, connector. If you could think of a role, you could, doesn't have to be one of these. As a matter of fact, I've had students in the past who've created their own roles, and so I'm going to be showing you some examples of what this actually, how students have used the roles. Now, one is a word wizard. So you could identify new and interesting words, and the visual thesaurus has some wonderful activities that, and I'm going to show you how some students have used this. Now, the discussion director's job is to ask open-ended questions that could promote thoughtful discussion among the group members, either in class or in the global community. And this could be done, and there are so many different tools that could use this, and we're going to be using a wiki. So years back when I worked with some middle school students, we were doing discussions, and so I'm just showing you. This was with 6th graders on how they had a conversation. And you could see one student did it at 9:12 p.m. at home, and this was a while back in 2004. Wow. Okay. Now, one of the roles could be a summarizer to summarize the major events, and again, there are so many different tools that could be used. And so you could see over here I have PowerPoint is not your only option. Look at some of the Web 2.0 that your colleagues used. You've become an expert in a Web 2.0 already, and you've seen what your colleagues have done. What I would love to see is maybe you would use a tool that somebody else has demonstrated in the Web 2.0 assignment. One of the roles could be a researcher or an illustrator. So this was something that was done in KidPix a while back. Passage master, I'm going to show you an example. And here is somebody. This was from Priscilla and the Wimps, and used kid pics, came up with a quote that that student in particular found memorable, and demonstrated the understanding. Then we have the connector. So connections between the text and personal or life experiences of people that you know. And so you might be reading the story and saying, gee, this reminds me of a historical figure, and you might want to use a primary document. So many things. Now, assessment. Assessment is self-assessment. Think about this. I invited you over my house here in the Virgin Islands, and we sat around and we had a wonderful discussion while we were drinking pina coladas or hurricanes or whatever, getting to a deep discussion, and it was time to end. Time for you to leave. And I said, before you leave, I have to give you an index card with your grade. You'd probably say to me, I think, Professor, you had too much to drink. Fact of the matter is, one way to turn your students off is by telling them, oh, you're going to be graded. I'm listening to what you have to say. No, these kids are tested. You know, they're tested so much. This is the last thing you want to do, is have any kind of testing, or it should be self-evaluation. Okay, now with this model, you could help your students who are non-readers or have fluency problems. There are so many ways they could still be a part of it. So these are some suggestions of what you could do for students who are struggling. And then there's software. Now, Thinking Reader is a great piece of software. In fact, they implement the reciprocal reading strategies that you have already been introduced to in Book Builder. Another part of literature circles, which we're not going to be doing, are extension projects. This is something that I've done in the past when I taught this course on campus, and I'm going to talk to you about it so that you could think about it in case you want to implement this model when you go back to school. So how does an extension project compare to your traditional book reports? There's a big difference. I know when I went to school, I hated book reports. I'd have to read a book and write about it, and the teacher would grade me and look at my spelling. There was no creativity, and the fact of the matter is you don't even have to have read the book. I mean, you could look at Cliff Notes and then do it. With an extension project, you really need to have read the book. And so, and this is something that you would share with many people. So you have access to this PowerPoint presentation. I've linked to it on the wiki, and you could look at the difference between book reports and extension projects. And so here are some guiding questions in case you decide to do extension projects. So show this to your students. Okay, and I have some examples of extension projects. So here is, now this one has a lot of scaffolding built into it. We were using Kidspiration and a character study. So I would use this for younger students. Here somebody did a commemorative stamp or a CD cover. This was all done in KidPix. Again, you have so many wonderful Web2O tools to choose from. Here's a story quilt. This is a good one. Persuasive writing from the Lemony Snicket. This is a 6th grader who wrote this. Wrote a letter to Justice Strauss, trying to convince Justice Strauss to marry. So I think actually to be a part, I'm writing to you on behalf of my play, The Marvelous Marriage. I think your skills and knowledge in being a judge would be perfect for a part of my play. Okay, well, this student could not have written this persuasive writing without having read the book and understanding the book. Okay, and there are some rubrics that you could use for self-assessment in this model for extension projects, or students could create their own. One of my favorite colleagues, Melissa McMullen, who taught 6th grade, had her students create their own rubrics using Ruby Star. All right, now years back when I was in the public school, in the middle school, I did a big project on Lemony Snicket, and I actually had my students at NYIT participate along with an undergrad class. So, and this is all online in case you want to see it. So getting started, what do you need to do? Well, you want to devote the time, because there's nothing in this model outside of what your students need to know. They're going to be collaborating, they're going to be talking, they're going to be engaged in higher level thinking skills, they're going to be writing, they're going to be reading. These are things that kids should be able to do. If you find that it's hard for your students to get started, you might want to have them do some mini lessons to understand the model. And I recommend that you do a search on Laura Candler, because she has some wonderful activities and mini lessons as well. Here's a link to the project that I did, the Lemony Snicket project, which remains online that you could look at. And there's a whole bunch of books. Now, these books have been here for a while. If you do a search on Amazon, I'm sure that you will come up with a lot more books. Okay, now, what I want to do is take you over to the wiki and show you what your requirements are. Now, all of the dates are listed on here, and I want to emphasize that this is an interactive project. You're going to be doing a project, people are going to be writing and reflecting on your work, and you're going to be answering their questions and responding to them, and there's going to be a discussion director who will be posting questions for discussion. If you don't stick to the due dates, there's no point. You're not going to be interacting. And so for this project, I will not accept any lateness. You have to do everything by the due date, and I have it over here. No credit if any part of this assignment is late. I'm not doing that, just, this is not a power trip, but I want you to really have the interactivity that this model requires. Okay, so what I'd like to do is show you an example of something that one of my former students did, and this is, so you could revisit this again on your own. And here, once again, you need to be a member of this wiki to participate. So what you're going to see in the navigation bar here will be a bunch of names, and your name will be here. And so you will click on your name, and that's where you will post your work. Okay, so first let's take a look at an exemplar, something that somebody did. Now, along with showing us your work, you're going to define your role. So this student was the visualizer, and explain what the role of the visualizer is. The student created her own rubric, which is right here. And then people will be in the discussion area clicking on here the same way you did in your Web 2.0 and writing. And I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But let's take a look here at the exemplar. And I got her permission to post this, by the way. This should get you psyched to read the book. Now you'll notice there was, I don't know if you did notice, but on one of the slides had a copyright on there, and the student asked for permission. I just want to let you know that in case you noticed. Okay, getting back here, back to our home page. As I mentioned, all of the rubrics are here, and I have some links that will explain to you all about literature circles and roles and everything that I just covered in the PowerPoint, plus more. Okay, now let me show you how the discussion director is going to work. So what I'm going to do is take you over to one of my other classes. Okay. So here you could see everybody's name is here, and then there's discussion director. So I'm going to click on discussion director. And what the discussion director will do, and by the way, there's only one discussion director, and the discussion, whoever wants that role, whoever has to ask me, and the first person I hear from gets it. And that is, will not have to do any other role. That is your role. But you're also going to, as discussion director, have to create a rubric based on your work as a discussion director. Were you asking open-ended questions and all of that? Did you respond to your classmates? And because the discussion director is going to have to come up with 6 questions, and they have to be open-ended, and then you have to be the moderator. So you have to read what other people are posting, and your job is to then ask a further question or comment so that you're going to get a conversation going. And so what you're going to be doing, discussion director, will be listing your questions along with your rubric on your page, and then over in the discussions area, you're going to, now I did this because initially when the discussion director just put it on the main page, and I wanted it in both places, so I kind of helped that person out. But the discussion director will then put, for question 1, will include the question, and here you could see the responses. So that's what it will look like. Okay, now let's see if there's anything that I forgot to go over with you. So let me go back here. Okay, again, I'm going to put everybody's name here. And so you'll click on your name. You will then post your work. And then once you're done with your work, you're going to keep on looking back at your discussion area, because people will be asking questions. Now, when you respond to somebody's work, the idea is not to just say, oh, that's a pretty picture. You want to be able to think about what they did and the connection that they made to the text. And you might say, wow, you know, that's a great connection, and here's the connection that I made, or that picture that you just did, or whatever it is, reminds me of. You want to have a meaningful conversation. So that is it. So be careful in looking at when the due dates are. So there's a due date for when you have to post your work. There's a due date for the discussion director, when the discussion director's questions have to be posted. When must you reply to the discussion director's questions, and then ask questions about your classmates or responses to your classmates' work. I think you're going to enjoy this. I know my former students did. And just think about that. Hopefully you're going to share this with your colleagues. And keep in mind that this model is not written in stone. I've done this to make it work in an online course. You might have some other ideas of how you might want to make it work in your classrooms. Maybe you'd want to do it face-to-face, or have some of it online. So there's just a lot you could do with it. And my feeling is that you're really giving students the gift of learning, of loving literature, not just sitting with them and testing them and preparing them for a state assessment. Because believe me, you know, I'm at the age now, I'm finished working, and hopefully I'm going to be on this planet for many more years, and there's a lot of things that I want to do, and I love to read. And fortunately, when I went to school, my time wasn't spent on getting prepared for an ELA test. I learned to love literature because it's just an enjoyment in life. And as teachers, I really think that we need to do more for our students than just prep for a test. So hopefully you're going to find this, this assignment meaningful and enjoyable. So I can't wait to see your work, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial.